Clear prop.
Star 73 is Cherokee number 2 following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Tuscadale. 1 Charlie Bravo, extra in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I'm fantastic. This is a Your Questions episode again. A lot of these come from the student pilot forum there on Facebook and other questions that have come through. Hopefully you guys enjoy these episodes. And if you have questions, please don't ever hesitate to send them in. So the first question that came through was, I'm currently studying to become a CFI, and I have a question about getting different answers, and they're getting different answers too. If I take the AGI, does that replace the FOI, or do I need to take the FOI first in order to obtain the AGI? So some acronym cleanup here. CFI being Certified Flight Instructor, AGI being Advanced Ground Instructor, FOI being Fundamentals of Instruction. So all those things are key to understand and know. So if you, and correct me where I'm wrong, Wally, but if you want to be a CFI A for airplane, then I have to take FOI, and then I can take my written exam for airplane, flight instructor airplane, and then I can take my check ride for flight instructor, and that gets me the ability to teach in an airplane.
That is correct. To become a CFI, you have to take 2 written tests, 2 knowledge tests. The fundamentals of instructing, which is basically the psychology of teaching, principles of teaching, really not a whole lot of airplane stuff is involved in this. It's a lot of educational stuff, which actually when I did it, you may be listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds horrible. I found it pretty interesting to learn about how people learn and that sort of thing. So for any instructor rating, whether it's a ground instructor or a flight instructor rating, you do have to take the fundamentals of instructing. The FAA says if you're going to instruct, you need to know how to instruct. And that's what the fundamentals of instructing is all about. Now, the fundamentals of the FOI knowledge test in and of itself does you absolutely nothing. It's worthless. It's a piece of paper, or it's just an endorsement, or it won't get you anything. To now get a certificate, you're going to need a second knowledge test result, and then possibly a check ride. So if you have aspirations and all you want to do is be a ground instructor, I want to be a ground instructor for the rest of my life. I never want to I never want to be in an airplane. And that might be something for somebody who might have a medical condition. Maybe they can't hold a medical, but they want to be a ground instructor. So you could go out and take the fundamentals of instructing knowledge test, and then take the AGI, the Advanced Ground Instructor knowledge test, or the IGI, the Instrument Ground Instructor, and those tests together would give you the opportunity to obtain a ground instructor certificate. It is a separate certificate. The advantage to a I have a ground instructor certificate. I also have a flight instructor certificate. The advantage to the ground instructor is that it never expires. Flight instructor certificate, you have to renew every 24 calendar months, and you can do it if you're an active flight instructor. You can show to the FAA that you've had so many sign-offs within the last 24 months, and you've had an acceptable pass rate, first-time pass rate, and they'll renew your certificate. There are also online refresher courses that you can do, or you can actually do in-person courses. Those are getting to be few and far between, but getting back to your original question, yes, you're always going to have to take the fundamentals of instructing knowledge test to get any kind of an instructor certificate.
Good. The next question. I have a question about FAA approval for my medical card. I got my medical card a few weeks ago. I've heard from the FAA that the FAA wants to call and ask some questions about my application. Is there a time frame that I should expect to hear from the FAA? and what would their call be about? Depends on a lot of variations there, but the FAA is probably a very busy organization, and I wouldn't think that call is going to come quick. You could proactively reach out to them in Oklahoma City and ask if you could find the person that might be in charge of the medical review. A lot of times, this predecessor of this question comes up at the fly school about what should I do to get my medical, and this is a shout out for the AOPA. They have a medical hotline. I would strongly encourage everyone to contact that medical hotline if they had questions about any previous thing in the past that may come up in the medical discussion with an AME. I think the AOPA can answer a lot of questions about things. I take high blood pressure medicine. I call them every year and make sure nothing's changed with my high blood pressure medicine so that I don't get a snafu when I talk to my AME. And while it's very common, and I doubt they'll ever be unapproved, I would sure hate to be taking something else and find out that I shouldn't be taking those together, and then tell my AME that, and then get in a whole bunch of trouble. If it's not something that is, I guess, regulatory in nature, then you can stop taking it. Call it a antihistamine or something like that, maybe a Zyrtec, something like that you're not supposed to take every 48 hours before flying, then you definitely would hate to walk in and say, I just took one of those pills, as an example. So in this specific question, we don't know the details, but call maybe Oklahoma City and ask for more guidance, or contact the AOPA's medical hotline and see if they can provide you some guidance as well. Two good resources for you to use.
Yeah, I would echo calling AOPA. They do a really good job with this, and there are just sometimes there are certain buzzwords that you shouldn't use, and they're going to help you out with that, and they'll say, don't say this or do say this.
Yeah, we're not saying a lie, but for sure make sure you say the right words in context. A recent friend of mine sent their young 16-year-old son to the doctor without going with them because they thought, what's the problem? There's not going to be any issues. They're going to quickly look him over and he's going to get his medical and he'll be able to solo in a few weeks. Unfortunately, the young man thought he had been diagnosed with ADHD, and back when he was like 6 or so, like this was something he had heard about, and he told the doctor, yeah, I got diagnosed, and he never had been diagnosed, but that set off a firestorm of reviews, and FAA got involved and all those things, and technically he had never been diagnosed, I think it was family rumor mill that maybe he had been diagnosed. I don't know, but that those words alone will set you way back with the medical examiner for sure.
Yeah.
Wally, we've been asked this question a couple times, but let's chat through it. What makes good VFR checkpoints?
This
forest?
Yeah.
Hey, there's a forest.
Right. This is a good question. Because I deal with this almost daily on check rides. First of all, a good VFR, on the commercial and on the private, we need to evaluate pilotage, and that means looking on the ground and finding something and telling me when we're over it. Okay, so we're going to go on a 200-mile cross-country flight, and we just plug in our destination in our GPS and we follow the magenta line. That's not what we're evaluating on these check rides. We need to be able to safely fly the airplane to our destination without that GPS. And so we are required, and I'm looking at the ACS for the private pilot, verify position within 3 nautical miles of flight planned route. Okay, so you got to be within 3 miles of your VFR checkpoint, and you need to get to it within 5 minutes of your the time that you've come up with on your flight plan. I see this a lot where people pick, first of all, I'll say, well, what's your first checkpoint? And they'll say, top of climb. Okay, well, top of climb, I don't really consider a checkpoint because you're always going to get to your top of climb. whether it takes 10 miles or 80 miles, you're going to get there. But it's not a geographical location over the ground. So it's fine to have that in your flight plan and saying, okay, in 7 minutes I should be at my top of climb. But that's, one reason why we're looking for these checkpoints is to make sure that we're on course. Well, I could be 180 degrees out of sync and still get to my top of climb, and I'm not anywhere near close to being on course. So obviously, I mean, this is going to be very obvious, but clearly identifiable landmarks on the ground make good checkpoints. I see a lot of times, well, crossing this highway. Well, we could be 30 or 40 let's say we're going east and west and there's a major north-south highway. Well, you could be 70 degrees off course, and you're eventually going to cross that highway. So, a town is good, a school, the local high school. I had a young man the other day. We were flying at 1,500 feet, and he told me that our next checkpoint was a tower, a 2,000 foot tall tower, and I said, well, okay. And I mean, that sent off a flag right away, because if we're 1,500 feet and we're going to fly to a tower that's 2,000 feet, that's a problem. And I asked
You'll know
him,
when you get there.
Yeah, exactly. I said, are we going to fly to the tower, or are we going to fly abeam the tower? And he goes, a beam. And I said, okay, go. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. So we're flying along, and he pointed to a tower that was well below us and said, okay, there's our point. And the end result of the check ride probably wasn't what he wanted to happen, but what I said to him during the debriefing, I said, okay, if we're 1,500 feet and the tower is 2,000 feet tall, we should be looking up at that tower. We shouldn't be looking down at that tower. So, I thought that was very elementary, but it didn't occur to him that a 2,000 foot tower is 500 feet higher than we are. And, the tower that we were looking at wasn't anywhere close to where he thought he was. Something else that does not usually make a good checkpoint is bodies of water, especially ponds or lakes, because depending on the rainfall or lack of rainfall in a given area, that lake or that pond may not be there, or it may be a lot bigger than it's depicted on the sectional. Now, I mean, if it's a major lake, that's a different story. But small ponds and lakes typically do not make good checkpoints. Another thing that sounds really good, but unless you're very familiar with the area, that does not make a good checkpoint is private airports. Private airports are usually grass strips, and again, unless you're just very familiar with it, they're very hard to identify. I've been looking down at small airports for a lot of years, and I'm probably pretty good at it because I kind of know what to look for. There's usually some buildings along this grass strip, but if you're not very in tune to what you're looking for, a private airport usually doesn't make a great VFR checkpoint. It sounds good because it sounds like, gee, I've got a potential landing spot if I have an emergency, but they're hard to pick out.
I used to always think that it was good to have a checkpoint pretty early after leaving the airport, right? Just to kind of make sure I was heading in the right direction. I always thought it was quick to have something right 1 minute, 2 minutes out, right? You're probably still 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet. Railroad tracks, are those suffice for you in the standpoint of, when I take off south from here and I turn towards I remember my check ride was Victoria. Those railroad tracks were something I was going to see really early on.
Yeah, and I think something early on does make a good checkpoint, because what happens is, let's say we're taking off from an airport that has a north-south runway. Let's say we're going north, and let's say your first checkpoint is 5 miles away. Obviously, you're going to get there a lot quicker if you're taking off north than if you're taking off south. So the time from your takeoff point to your first checkpoint may not be very accurate. Now your time from your first checkpoint to your second checkpoint, now we're kind of in the groove. We're in the slot, and so you don't want to, you want to make your first checkpoint pretty close in, so. And essentially use that as a starting point, because sometimes you may get vectored by air traffic control, and or there's other traffic that you've got to go behind. So that time from takeoff to the first checkpoint may be very, very inaccurate.
And if we do use something that's long, like a highway, railroad tracks, power line, something like that, you're saying pick something else that may intersect that, to say the intersection of those two things is my checkpoint. Right. So 2 power lines crossing.
Right.
The north side of a city has a highway on it, or a railroad track on it. The railroad track's at the north side of that city. Yeah. Those sorts of things. What about local things that maybe aren't depicted on a sectional, but I know them because I fly this route? Are they okay? Are those okay if I make those? The water tower on the north side of Hempstead, is that, or the Prairie View A&M Stadium, are those things okay?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. If you know it's there, and you know where, if you can show me on the sectional where it is and say, hey, it's right here on the northwest side of the town. Even
if it's not depicted, as long as I can point an arrow to it or something.
Yeah, okay. I'm fine with that.
All right, perfect. Those make good checkpoints. I definitely think if it's depicted on the sectional, probably better. Big, non-movable, obviously things that you're gonna get to, that you can obviously time as well. Make good VFR checkpoints. Anyone have any thoughts? Next question. Anyone have any thoughts on student pilot insurance? There's a bunch of secondary questions to this one, but this question comes up a lot. The flight school that I own requires some student pilot insurance. Most flight schools do nowadays. Very few don't. So let's answer the question. I mean, I definitely think it's a very good thing for student pilots. Before I owned the flight school and I was a pilot renter, I had my own insurance. And I think there's some confusion about how insurance works, and I'm still going to get my insurance agent on here one day soon, and we're going to have a dialogue with them. But in short, insurance for a flight school is a fleet policy where they're covering all operations for those aircraft, including student operations. But the insurance company is not going to not just turn a blind eye to negligence or other things that a pilot might do. Being a bad pilot could be negligent. You know, you obviously know you should do a certain number of hours training, recency, currency, all these things. Well, if you rented a plane and you weren't current and hadn't been current, and you put passengers in that plane with you and you hurt all of them, the insurance company is probably going to come after you no matter what the policy is. It's called subrogation. And I would suspect very few, if any, flight schools have a non-subrogation clause anymore, because their policy would be so expensive they probably couldn't operate their flight school. So the insurance company could subrogate you, and you might be subrogated for the whole thing. The primary insurance of the flight schools might be the insurance, but the insurance company might say, look, we're not just going to cover you because you intentionally did something silly, like flew 100 feet above a river and ran out of gas and had to land in the trees. That would be a very bad thing, and you may be responsible for that. So having renter's insurance provides you a level of protection, maybe not negligence, but provides you a level of protection to where you could ultimately not have to come up with these funds out of pocket. Sometimes it covers the deductibles. Some people cover a lot more. Some schools, and I saw a Cirrus school recently who requires $200,000 worth of hull insurance. That policy is probably fairly expensive, but to each their own. If a school has a policy, you need that much minimally. But I would think if I was a renter today, I would probably want to cover at least 50% of the hull of the planes that I'm flying, just to have a base protection. That way, if I caught a wingtip on a building in an unknown area at night, my insurance is probably going to cover that, and I would not be too concerned about being segregated in a situation like that. Anything to add to renter's insurance, Wally?
No, I have it as well. I'm probably not the insurance expert to talk about, though.
And nor am I. I'm just sharing my 2 cents. We will get my insurance agent on soon.
And
we'll
I think the key is that most insurance, it says the word in there, accident. It's for accidents, not negligence.
Right. For sure. Next question. Anyone use Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane and feel it actually benefited their training at all? Or is it just a fun game? What should I buy? Blah, blah, blah. Lots of follow-up stuff here as well. I am a huge fan of simulators in general. They're less expensive. They're less dangerous. There's all kinds of reasons that they will be very, very beneficial to your training. I'm a huge fan of home simulators. I tell everyone that sits down and asks me questions about flight training that they should buy one of these 2 applications. I am an ex-Microsoft employee, but for some reason I'm a fan of X-Plane. I think it just looks a little crisper. I have not played the new Flight Simulator. If you have a decent computer at home, I would buy one of these 2 applications. They're both $59.99 for a base plan with a Cessna in it, and probably be about a $150 joystick. And the reason that you need a $150 joystick, in my opinion, is you need something with sort of a throttle quadrant, and you need something with more buttons on it so you can program those buttons. You need something to turn on your landing light. You need something to lower the flaps. You need something like a trim tab if possible. But I don't think you have to go out and buy all these whiz-bang 3D printed light consoles and light switches and all this other stuff, because it does get carried away at that point. You might spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a home simulator. If you take my suggestion, spend the $60 and the $150, you're going to be at $210, assuming you have the computer. That's the biggest expense, of course. But then that's less than one lesson that you're going to get to repeat over and over, and probably most beneficial for your instrument training. But you can probably shoot any approach in the United States in those base packages. Probably comes with plates in it. You can do a lot with the radios, and meaning navigational radios and GPSs, and shoot approach after approach after approach. And for that $210, you're just not going to get that much bang for your buck in any other way in aviation than to buy that home simulator. Now, if you only play with it as a game, you see if you can do a loop-de-loop in a Cessna, then you're probably not going to get the benefit. But if you use it as a tool and you spend some time to stay proficient with your instrument flying, put on low IFR, take off from an airport, navigate to another airport, don't cheat. Lots of them now with your home Wi-Fi will send a ForeFlight signal so you can get GPS location on ForeFlight. Very, very powerful tools for just a couple $100.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't own one of these, but when I was doing a little bit more instructing, I could tell when a student would come in and have some experience doing this, and 90% of the time it was positive things. Every once in a while they had some bad habits that they imported from playing these games, but most of the time just knowing what the speeds are, the flap speeds, what a good approach speed is, it just makes you look, study approach charts a little bit better while flying the airplane, rather than just studying them while sitting on the couch. So I think it's a huge benefit.
Agreed. Next question. Has anyone experienced motion sickness when starting their private pilot training? What ways can I combat it? Does it get better over time? We did about half an episode I don't know, 6 or 7 shows back on this topic. We're sitting in my office at a flight school. I can smell the peppermint that Wally uses on a regular basis. We talked a little bit about the peppermints, the essential oils that you might rub on your upper lip. If you try that, we talked about a friend of mine who uses ginger gum and has not had any issues with it since. I think you have to be careful with some of the wristbands and the over-the-counter medications, as they may not be approved by the FAA for use during training or flying. So make sure you do check that. Make sure you reach out to the AOPA's medical hotline and ask those questions as well. But I think in my experience and in Wally's experience, we've both seen it get a lot better over time. As you continue to control the aircraft more and more and more, you're going to it probably will subside naturally, but maybe a little bit of ginger gum, maybe a little bit of peppermint, maybe just a little bit of conversation with your instructor to do a little bit more straight and level flying for a while, would all lend you to being a little less motion sick.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you that if you do get a little motion sickness the first couple of times you fly, don't get discouraged. This is something that I believe you can work through. I've had a lot of students who have gotten this way. Sometimes on check rides, some people get sick as well, and we've always been able to work through it. And you're probably the best expert on your body of anybody else. Do you need to eat a good meal before you fly? Do you maybe not need to eat? I don't know. Do you need to drink water or Gatorade or something before you fly? Experiment with different things and different, especially with your eating habits. I think in general, most people will say it's better to not eat before flying, and I actually think it's probably just the opposite. I think in reality, it is good to have something in your stomach. The bad news is that if you've got something in, that might be something to come out. So, if I have 6 sacks in my flight bag, and pretty much all these airplanes have them in the airplane, but that's something to keep in your flight bag so that if you do have an episode, you have some place to make the stuff to some place to throw up into, is what I'm saying, rather than all over yourself. But it is something that does and will subside. Again, I pretty much, anytime you see me, if you reach in my pocket, there's going to be 2 things. There's going to be chapstick, and there's going to be this little bottle of peppermint oil. I just like the smell of it. I was actually flying an airline flight yesterday, and my first officer said, "Wow, I smell peppermint. That smells good." And I said, "That's me. I just opened up this little bottle here." And I think most people find the smell of peppermint nice. I mean, I've never heard anybody say, "Oh gosh, I can't stand the smell of peppermint." Right. So this does have some, some positive things other than just smelling good.
No doubt, and I was shocked that ginger gum has come up many, many times since I saw a friend of mine use it, and it must create some calming, easing, stomaching effect, because it definitely helps. All right, one more question. My son's regular instructor will not be available during his next scheduled flight training, but that instructor recommended another instructor to avoid canceling the training. My son is only 15 and has only trained with one instructor. The question goes on to talk about, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? What's one weekend off really going to matter in the grand scheme of things? He can't solo for a while anyway, on and on and on. I think there's a lot of loadedness in this question based on this person's age particularly, but we talk about it all the time. You never know when that next lesson could come because of weather or planned maintenance or whatever. If he's got a schedule, I don't think I would want to cancel that schedule. And I think it's a great idea to train with multiple instructors. I really cringe when I, at my own flight school, hear people saying I'm only going to train with so-and-so. That's Wally doesn't always fly with the same first officer. A first officer doesn't always fly with the same captain. You're going to have to learn to work with a broad range of people in a crew environment, and many, many different crew members. Might as well start doing that early on in your pilot career and not wait until you're forced to do it by your airline one day. So I definitely think a second instructor is a good idea, for not just the reason of what I just said, crew and learning how to work with other people, but there's things people see differently than others, right? So I had this opportunity as a student. My instructor took some time off, and I had to fly with someone else. That someone else taught me a whole lot about slips and things that I was apprehensive in. My good relationship with my first instructor let me get away with not doing some of these things. The new guy that I got was like, no, you got to do it. We're doing it. Slip, 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 slip. And as much as I didn't enjoy it, I now look back and appreciate it tremendously. And I think what happened for me was we broke kind of a friendship relationship that I had with the first guy, and I got back to that instructor-student relationship with the new guy. And then I went back to the other guy, and we did all my instrument training together. But I asked hey, let's be friends outside of here, but let's have this student-pilot relationship when we are working together. And it was great. Obviously a great relationship where things worked out great. But two instructors really, really are helpful. And whether you cancel or not, I don't know that I have that exact answer, but you definitely should train with more than one person.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think it's probably not the greatest thing to just go in every day and not know who your instructor is, because you do build a rapport. You learn the personality of the instructor and the student, and there's some nonverbal ways of communicating that you and this person may develop, which is a good thing. But it's just like buying a product. I mean, if you're in the market for a mid-size pickup truck, you're probably not just going to go to one dealership. I mean, maybe unless you've got some, you really want brand X. You're probably going to go to the X dealer and then go to the Y dealer and then go to the Z dealer, and you're going to kind of compare notes and see what the other options are. And that's, with a different instructor, you're going to see things from just a little bit different perspective. And each instructor probably has their own pet peeves, which are, things that instructor really is puts a lot of emphasis on. And so just flying with a different instructor, you're just getting a different way of seeing things. And that new instructor may see something that first instructor didn't see. So I think it's a good opportunity. Look at it as an opportunity. Don't look at it as a hindrance, but an opportunity to get a different set of eyes on you and a different perspective on some things.
Yeah, I like that perspective. And I think the opportunity word is the good one, because most I would have never done it had it not been kind of forced upon me. So it did work out really, really well. And different techniques doesn't mean they're doing it wrong, or one was doing it wrong and one's doing it right. There's a lot of, I guess, latitude and technique around flying. And I think each little person that I've ever flown with has provided a little bit of widget of information that's made me a better pilot. So the slippery slope is that you fly and have to almost get asked to refly things over and over. And hopefully you're not in that situation. Hopefully you're following a syllabus and you're doing the right things at a flight school or with an independent that would allow you to transition some of this stuff. I would say that would be my one yellow flag, is if you started duplicating things, that you need to figure out how to limit that with a syllabus or something. Well, that's all the time we have today. Hopefully we helped. If you have questions, send them to us. Send them to us on social media. Email me, Bobby, at behindtheprop.com. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.